So before I start, I want to give a little disclaimer. I've never actually given a book report before, so I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just going to go over themes in the book and kind of just what happens, but try not to spoil it too much because nobody likes when somebody spoils the book. So now that that's over and done with, let's just jump right into the main portion of the video. The book I'll be reporting on is Jayber Crow. I'm going to have 3 main points in my video, giving my initial impressions on the story, before and after finishing it, themes in the story, and connections to Huckleberry's other works, and just other books in general. So, time for the initial impressions of the book. I chose to do Jayber Crow just because everyone kept referring to it in class, like constantly. Rarely would a class go by without someone comparing or contrasting something that Barry wrote to Jayber Crow, forcing me to wonder what was so great about this story. I'm also not a big Barry fan in general. I'm not a naturalist or anything like that. So I disagree with a lot of stuff that he says. So I came in not expecting very much, just completely interested because everyone was just constantly talking about it. I ordered the book on Amazon, and when the book came, my heart dropped. It's a fat book about the same size as That Distant Land, the one that we're reading in class. I was expecting something maybe the size of like Mere Christianity or something like that, like a C.S. Lewis book, not The Stand by Stephen King or anything. That demotivated me a little bit, but I decided to press on, and I'm glad that I did. As I'm sure most people know, the story is about Jonah Crow, aka Jay Crow, aka Jaybird Crow, aka Jayber Crow. He's the barber of Port William, gravedigger for a graveyard there, and a church deacon. His parents died when he was 6, and he was adopted by some older people that he knew only as Aunt Cordy and Uncle Offie. They died when he was a little older than 10, and he was sent to live in an orphanage, the Great Shepherd. The orphanage was a Christian orphanage, but it wasn't a very good place. The kids' first names were replaced with their first initial, for example, J. Crow. According to Jayber, this had the assumption that we were no longer the people that we had been, which for all practical purposes was the correct assumption. We became in some way faceless to ourselves and one another. This orphanage shapes who Jayber is. He goes by his first initial for a long time after this, and leading him to assume he's called to ministry in the pastorage, to the absolute delight of Brother Whitespade, the man in charge of the orphanage. Jayber then begins to attend Pigeonville College as a pre-ministerial student. This doesn't work out for him. He starts to have doubts, similar to the story we read recently about the soldier Art coming home. This chapter about Jayber and his doubts is one of the most impactful and touching scenes in the book, in my opinion. I'm going to read a few paragraphs to give you a peek at what his thoughts are. So this, I thought, is what it is meant by "Thy will be done" in the Lord's Prayer, which I had prayed time and time again without thinking about it. It means that your will and God's will may not be the same. It means there's a good possibility that you won't get what you pray for. It means that in spite of your prayers, you're going to suffer. It means you may be crucified. I had prayed my own private prayers complacently enough, asking for things I wanted, even though I knew well already that a lot of the things I wanted I was not going to get, no matter how much I prayed for them. Though I hadn't got around to thinking about it, I already knew that I had been glad to have some of the things I got that I had never thought to want to, let alone pray for. So skipping down a little bit. Does prayer change God's mind? If God's mind can be changed by the wants and wishes of us mere humans, as if deferring to our better judgment, what is the point of praying to him at all? And what are we to think when 2 good people pray for opposite things, as when 2 devout mothers of soldiers on opposite sides pray for the safety of their sons or for victory? So I just really like that part. Jayber decides that he isn't being led into ministry and decides to leave the college, and after talking with one of his professors. This all takes place in the first 7 chapters, so a lot happens really fast. After Jayber leaves the college, it kind of cuts away from the backstory and moves to his current life as a barber and half member of the Port William community. So that's all I'm going to give you on that. If that grabs your interest, I'd recommend the book. Even if it doesn't, I would still recommend it. It's one of the few things by Huckleberry that I actually have enjoyed so far. So now it's time to break down some themes. So now that you know a little bit of the backstory of the book, it's just time to break it down. Jayber has a problem with commitment, which shows throughout the story, only coming to a head in the final portion of the book. He struggles to fully involve himself in the community of Port William, leaving a sign on his door that reads, "Back at 6:30. He says about the sign, "My clock and I would be back at 6:30, but it didn't say which day. And sooner or later, until the last time, I always got back." I'm not going to spoil the last time for you. You'll have to figure that out for yourself. Anyway, this shows his struggle with commitment throughout the whole story. He also he buys a car, giving him an easy way out whenever it gets too hard to be in the community. He learns how to fix it so he doesn't have to rely on anyone. All this points to his problem with being a part of the community. At the same time, Jayber needs the structure of the community to be the best that he can, forcing him into a crossroads. He can either choose to be a full functioning part of the Port William community, or he can stay on the outside, looking in but never a full part. Sounds suspiciously like an essay that Huckleberry wrote that we read, doesn't it? I'll talk about that later. Another big theme, big shocker incoming here, you're never going to expect this, is a good natural, is just a theme of good agricultural work and modern farming techniques. Barry writes a character into the story that is basically the antagonist. He's no Sauron, but in a book like this, he's the closest thing to it. He cheats on his wife, Maddie, who Jayber has a weird relationship with. Not a relationship, sort of an obsession that's debated. That's a debated part of the book that I'm not really going to touch on. I don't know particularly if he has a more fatherly view of her or if it's more romantically. Anyway, the farmer Troy cheats on his wife, breaking the bonds of marriage, which we all know how Barry feels about those, and runs his farm into the dirt, racking up huge debts along the way. Pretty much exactly the guy that Huckleberry would hate, and Troy's him. It's no coincidence that the man who ruins his farm is also the one who cheats on his wife, and losing the farm Maddie got from her parents, Athy, who I swear has been in one of the short stories that we've read, but I can't remember which one, and his wife, Della, who are both representative of good country folk. The loss of the farm is clearly symbolic, there's no way it isn't. I think it's representative of the loss of typical family and home life in current times, and the loss of the good old farming style, farming style techniques used to not hurt the earth. This is just one of the few, just a few of the symbols and themes in Jayber Crow. You're going to have to read them to find the rest. Sorry. So now it's time to connect some stuff. I'm not really going to say much on the connections between short stories and other works of Huckleberry. Those are pretty obvious, and if you read the book, you'll pick up on them. All of his stories take place in the same place, like within 100 years of each other. There's just going to be overlap. I'm going to focus on the connections between Jayber Crow and Huckleberry Finn. I hinted at it a little bit earlier in the speech, but now I'm going to address it directly. I think that Jayber Crow is Huckleberry's attempt to fix Huck Finn. We all remember the essay that we read that he talked about the flaws of Huck Finn's ending and how he thought that Mark Twain refused to let Huck Finn join the community. He should have, simply because Twain didn't want to, because he didn't want to. Jayber Crow has many of the same struggles that Huck Finn does. Both are orphans, more or less. They have a sort of journey in which they find themselves, or in the case of Huck Finn, don't find themselves. Jayber Crow has this journey in a bar when he sees Troy with another woman. Jayber's there with his sort of girlfriend. It's kind of complicated, and he's really mad. What Troy does is the catalyst for Jayber's final commitment to the community, and why I believe that Barry wrote him as a finalized Huck Finn. What Troy does forces Jayber to realize that they aren't really that different after all. Both of them doing things that aren't right, they're trying to have the cake and eat it too. This realization is what causes Jayber to finally commit to the Port William community. How he does this is up to you to find out. Thanks for listening to me give this book report, book review, whatever you want to call it. I would recommend Jayber Crow, especially if you enjoy Huck Finn. There's less racism and stuff in Jayber Crow too, so that's always a plus. Anyway, I hope I convince you to get and read the book. It's definitely worth the read. Goodbye.